Hi everyone, my name is Donnie Lowy. I'm here at Closeoutexplosion.com. I hope you're having an amazing day today. As you can see behind me, I have a room here full of brand name designer girls clothing. All this girls clothing came from a store that I recently bought out. And I want to share you some tips on how to start your own children's clothing business. You're welcome to come to me if you'd like to buy this children's clothing. Or you can also, I'm sure there's other wholesalers and you could have any clothing manufactured for you. So I want to give you some tips. Some of these tips are from my own experience. Some of the tips are from my customers' experience. And some tips are actually from the experience of the owner of this clothing store, or previous owner of the clothing store that had, that had all this children's clothing. So number one is you have to know your market. It's very important to match up the right kids' clothing to the right audience, because you can have beautiful, let's say, party dresses, but if your customers are looking for activewear, it's going to be a mismatch. On the other hand, your customers might want very economical, sturdy clothing for their children, so their children can play in the outdoors, get the clothing dirty, and they could easily, wash the clothing or replace the clothing if need be. So you have to make sure that you have the clothing that's appropriate for that market. Now, let's see over here, right? Let's say you look at these really fancy blouses, right? And these fancy dresses, right? So that's going to be for a customer who wants fancy evening dresses, fancy blouses. But if the customer wants maybe a more utilitarian item, such as, these skirts, then that's the type of items that you're going to have. It's very important to always match up your merchandise to your customers. Number two, make sure that you have the right budget for your customers. In other words, if you have clothing, let's say that retails for $100 and you could offer it for $80 or $70, you're technically giving someone an amazing deal. But if your customers cannot afford clothing at that, at that price range of $50, $60, or $70, then it is not going to work. On the other hand, let's say if you have clothing which is really beautiful clothing, but it's, let's say, it's lower price clothing, it's budget clothing, and it's clothing, I want to just show you something maybe very, more simple. Let's say it's a t-shirt, such as this t-shirt. It's a nice, good item. It's an item which I believe the original retail is $29.85. So a t-shirt like this t-shirt over here, sure, if it's $29.85, you could sell it to your customers for, let's say, $8, $9, you're giving them a great deal. But what if your customers are only looking for higher end clothing? What if they're not looking for simpler t-shirts or simpler clothing? Then it's going to be a mismatch. So it's really important to know your customers' taste, their styles, and also their budget and what they're looking to buy. Another thing it's important to know also when you sell children's clothing is what you're going to use the children's clothing for. Is going to be for religious occasion. Then you have to make sure that it fits those requirements. Do you have a more religious, more conservative, type of customer? Then of course you're going to want a certain type of clothing. Essentially, you need to know what styles they need, and also if they have a preference for certain brands. Are they brand oriented, meaning do they only want clothing by certain brands, or are they open to clothing by other brands, or are they even open to private label and generic clothing? So all these things are important to know. Now, it's also very important to have, the right location. Here I sell wholesale. So even over here, someone might say, I should have maybe nice pictures. Maybe I will do that and put nice displays. But with a store, it's definitely very important. You want to have pictures of, children that are wearing the clothing that you're selling. This way, people can envision what the clothing's going to look like on their children. Of course, if you have a store, you need to have a dressing room. You also should be very clean, very bright. It's very important. One thing that this clothing store did right, which was, was great, his clothing store was super well lit up. It was very bright. The floors were beautiful, had marble tiles. It had, the walls were painted so nicely. Everything that I was going to say, the props, but the furnishings in the store, everything was up to date and new. All of that is very important. Also, it's very important whether you sell online or offline to display the prices very clearly. And I recommend that someone should have, the original retail price, and then next to it have your price that you're selling. This way people could see what a great value you're getting. Now you might ask, if the owner of this children's clothing store had such beautiful children's clothing, which he did, and he had clothing which retails, some of these items here could retail up to, I saw, $156, and he was selling them at a really good price. So then why didn't it work? Because unfortunately the rent was very high in his location, and his location is just a little off the main area, the main traffic area, And all of that makes a big difference. So if you want to make sure that you have a better chance of making, you have to be very careful with the rent. And you also have to make sure you're in a busy area. Sometimes it doesn't pay to save money if you're not going to be in a busy area. And sometimes it does pay to save money if you're going to use that marketing, that money you have as a marketing budget to attract customers to come to you. And what I would recommend also, try to have both an online and an offline presence. Try to have a store. Try to go to a flea market, swap meets. You could sell from your home if it's appropriate for you. And at the same time, have a website. Why? Because some customers are going to want to buy online. Some customers are going to want to buy offline. There are customers who are going to come to your store, look at what you have. Maybe they're not ready to buy, but if you have a website, then they'll buy the clothing later through the website. Or vice versa. They find your website, as it happens in my wholesale business. They're like, wow, I really like the products. I like the prices. Donnie Lowy has great brands, great fashions, great values. Potentially they feel they can make money on it, and then they want to come in person. So I believe it's important to have both an offline and an online location. All right, I know Amazon, sells only online. Well, actually, Amazon has started to open up stores, so I take that back, right? Amazon has started to develop their own retail presence, so I think it makes sense to have both, all right? My website is closeoutexplosion.com. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day.